Welcome, everyone. We are delighted to have you here with us and very excited about today's presentation. It is a privilege to welcome Dr. Tom Creely, Ph.D. He is a principal with Ethics Firma. Very, very excited to hear from him, learn from him, and learn about the axiometrics. This is going to be a great presentation. Just to give all of you a heads up, several of you did submit questions when you registered. I do have those, and we'll be feeding those to Tom as we go. If you have additional questions during the presentation, please feel free to type them into the question panel in your control box for the webinar. I will monitor those as we go, and where I can, I'll ask them of Tom, and then those that we are unable to get to during, we'll stay around afterwards and get them answered then. I am often asked if you will have access to this information later. We are going to record today's presentation and load it on our YouTube channel, so I will send all of you a link to it so that you can see it on the YouTube channel. Do watch for that. In addition, Tom's got some things he is offering you. So at the very end, he'll let you know you can access those if you want. He'll give you his email address, and I will include it in the email that's going out to you as well. Tom, I got to tell you, I consider him, in addition to being a colleague and obviously a wonderful professional, I also have the privilege of calling him a friend. So very excited to have you here today, Tom. Thank you so much for being here and doing this with us. Please go ahead. What I'm going to do is flip the screen over to you and ask you to take over, and you can start with your slideshow. So thank you, Tom.
All right. Thank you very much, Kathy, for your wonderful introduction. Hit the right button here. Presenter. Second.
There we go.
There we go. It's great to be here this afternoon and to talk to you about axiometrics, which is the theory of value. Axiology is a study in looking at what we value as individuals. Dr. Robert S. Hartman is the actual father of this whole concept and who has studied it for many years. But his actual beginnings with axiology formulated when he was a student in Germany. And at that time, this is in the 1930s, he believed that if Hitler's regime could engineer evil, then good could be engineered. And classmates, many of the ranking officers in Hitler's government, they would enter into debate. And obviously, as we well know, we saw how the diverging thoughts of developing and engineering good versus developing and engineering evil parted ways in that discussion. Dr. Hartman began to read the tea leaves of what was going on in the German society, and he exited Germany and to the UK, and then on to the United States, where he entered Northwestern University and received his Ph.D. and then taught Ohio State, Yale, MIT, and the University of Tennessee over his career. It was at the University of Tennessee where he did most of his development with students and other professors in the development of axiology. This theory of value looks at what do we value and how do we determine those values. And it looks at our capacity for valuing ourselves and also the capacity for valuing the things and people in the world. So through the years, and it continues today, extensive research is done in this whole area of axiology. And actually there's the Robert S. Hartman Institute. Each year they have a conference in October, and they bring peer-reviewed papers and research and discuss them and debate them, and they also publish a journal, the Journal of Formal Axiology, Theory and Practice. Axiology looks at value talent. The value talent is a capacity to value and look at the ability to organize your thinking and emotions to make decisions and value judgments. Your value talent is a measure of your ability, first, to see and filter what is happening around you and in yourself. Second, to build concepts and ideas by focusing on what is important to you. And third, to translate your ideas and expectations into decisions. Now, we look at value in three perspectives as individuals. First, our value talent is intrinsic or spiritual value. And this is a dimension of uniqueness and singularity, persons and things as they exist in and of themselves. In other words, we are spiritual beings. We have a sense of self-worth and value. It also looks at our ability to read people, and as well as our ability to look at our own values and our priorities in life from an intrinsic perspective. A second value talent is extrinsic, and this is the practical application, situational value, comparing things to each other, looking at abstract properties, and it's dealing with material and the real, comparisons of good, better, and best, and seeing things as they compare with others in their class. So in a more simple phrase, it's practical judgment, having the ability to read the environment, and from the looking at the world, and then also ability to see our contribution and the roles that we play in interacting with others as well. And the third is systemic. We have a tendency to look at things from a systemic point of view because these are our concepts. These relate to the ideas of how things should be, and ideas of goals, structured thinking, policies, procedures, rules, regulations, the oughts, and the shoulds. So these are the three foundational aspects of value: intrinsic, extrinsic, and systemic values. Now, why you want to have axiometrics profiles or assessment? Well, first of all, it's objective. It's about deciding and prioritizing what you value. Second, it can't be biased. In fact, if you try to manipulate the assessment and have your biases to get the outcomes you want, it will not compute in the algorithms that have been assigned to the various properties, and will not even print out. It doesn't invade anyone's privacy because we don't ask any personal questions about in that respect. It's a measurement of your thinking abilities and patterns of thinking. Also, nothing is ever sold to anyone for any purpose because it is designed strictly for the end user as a consultant in helping people to grow or to build teams in whatever that purpose may be in your professional line. Also, AI has been validated in the business environment. Numerous scientists, engineers have certainly tested this. IBM, AT&T, and others have taken some of the calculations and to check them out, to look for the accuracy, and have found them to be valid, and which is wonderful. We would like for them to test our models in order to maintain our credibility and the accuracy of our assessments. It doesn't discriminate to gender, race, religion, there are no questions that are even allude to any of those categories that could lead to discrimination or bias. It also is relevant to a person's performance and the organization's performance and that decision and thinking processes. Now, I want to say that it is not a self-report. The assessment, because what you do, and I'll explain a little bit more, is you prioritize value statements. And so that's why it's difficult. You know, if you're taking a Myers-Briggs personality type indicator, you have a tendency to want to be a certain style of a leader or be more of a P personality rather than a J personality or vice versa. And they can sometimes be manipulated. Also, it's not a 360 report, again, because you're making decisions. And this is not people coming back and giving their opinion. You know, there's great value in both of these, but you know, the axiometrics is superior in the technology as well as its theory. The 360 I found from my own personal experience, and I had taken, and I was reading through my reports, and they all looked really good, you know, some good opinions and good recommendations and suggestions for my improvement, etc. And I got to one that was diametrically opposed to everybody else. And it turned out to be my immediate supervisor, whom I thought was my best advocate and supporter. So obviously there's some faults to some of these for inaccuracies. So this gives a good balance in decision making as leaders and in our decisions for our personal lives. So who uses the axiometrics? Well, here are a few. There are many more. Obviously, I could not get them all on the slides, but this is just a sample from nonprofits to military, major corporations, even small businesses, and certainly individuals in coaching situations or executive development, succession planning. There are three profiles that we use in three categories, so to speak. And we have assessments, we have screenings, and third is development. Let's look for a moment at, yes.
Tom, let me jump in with one of these questions that came in, because I think that will help in terms of where you're going here. And so basically, they want to know what the niche is for this assessment relative to other assessment options.
Well, the thing is that the niche is you have many options with the axiometrics. We have, by taking the one assessment and prioritizing the value statements, we can develop about 50 different assessments or profiles from those values that you reflect in your thinking. And so, and I think you'll get the answer as I go along a little bit clearer in the presentation.
Okay.
And then I'll explain the actual process of taking the assessment. Yeah, this first one is capacity assessment, and looking at the individual's performance potential and what is the accurate picture of their developmental needs. Capacity assessments, we use this in profiles for customer service, sales, executive management, manager, personal performance, nursing services, physician, security guards, entrepreneur analysis. They're quite accurate in what they reflect. And then we also have the competency in addition to the capacity of being able to do the job and to be there? What is your confidence level? Their individual talents are measured and looked at, and what are those developmental needs? And the assessments that would use this would be the professional competencies, personal competencies, project management, and risk tolerance. Then there's screenings. So you want an instrument, you've got a client that is looking to hire some people for a sales job or customer service. The screenings can bring more knowledge about areas of risk to an individual relative to performing certain tasks and functions. And also, it's along with that comes an interview guide, which gives some questions and some role-playing opportunities. The screening reports give a comprehensive view of specific work-oriented competencies, and it exposes the strengths and areas for development. It gives interview notes that or aid in doing the interview and questioning. We have a general employment profile, sales, and customer service profiles. Now, the interview guide is a summary of items related to attitude, problem solving, self-image, motivators, and stressors. I found a lot of people today in hiring, particularly with the younger people coming into the workforce and the millennial generation, so to speak, that are really concerned about the attitude of people who come in. So this would be a good tool for that. We have the assessments or profiles that we use for that are applicant interview, manager interview, sales interview, and customer service interview. And then third is development. This is the professional development reports that looks at the strengths and vulnerabilities in leadership roles. While at the same time, it provides many suggestions for improvement and overall framework and methodology for personal growth. The key ones we use for that are personal pathways, personal pathfinder, and sales style. So those are the three categories of assessments with, I've just given a few of the assessments or profiles under each of these. And so we have actually, yes.
I think that's a great place for another one of the questions. They're asking, how are axiometrics used for optimal performance coaching?
Well, for optimal performance coaching, we have one in particular. It's called personal performance, and it examines a person's, looks at it from fire, faith, focus, and the future. And how is an individual, why do they fear disappointing others? Why is there fear about performing one's best? What about fear of realizing goals? Finding freedom from fear about fitting in, fear about being worthwhile, the need to achieve, self-attitude, belief in the future, drive toward goals, and looking at flexibility. This is the personal performance profile assessment. And so this takes an in-depth look at all of these categories that I've just mentioned to you and helps that individual to recognize those vulnerabilities or the impediments that may be there and also what their strengths are. And then it helps to give suggestions on how to overcome those. Obviously, you take the assessment along with your skills as a coach or counselor and work with that individual in reflective thinking and introspection to develop optimal maximization in their skills and abilities. And the thing is, it helps them to develop their moral thinking, and it helps them to learn to expand their capacity for moral thinking as a leader. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, I think that gave some good insight. I'm guessing you're going to build on it as you go through.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And then there's personal development that reports the individual tools that they need to affect real change in the life. And that's just what I referred to about this personal performance assessment. Now, how does the Axiometrics assessment work? Well, we measure capacities. What is your capacity? To what degree do you make good or bad decisions? And secondly, is measuring that value. Determining the nature of the culture in which you find yourself and measuring yourself and your values against that culture that you find. For instance, you take the assessment. The first 18 value statements would be related to your values, the values you hold. And the second set would be how you see your business organization that you work with. The process is certainly is asking you to complete a simple task. And it would go, I would give a password and username, you log in, you go to it. You will see the first set of 18 value statements. Just as an example, the value statements, you have to answer from the most positive to the most negative. So a positive would be a newborn baby. That's a positive statement. We all like newborn babies. A negative statement might be an airplane crash. And so you can see that the newborn baby would be up at the top and where the airplane crash would be at the bottom. But the statements in between are value statements. And what you do, you prioritize those according to what's most positive and what's most negative. Then when you get to the middle, you really have to do a little bit of thinking. And usually the first thought that comes to mind is the best in any of the assessments. And sometimes there's a little bit of debate on the values and where you place, which is when you get around to 9, 10, and 11, and 12, somewhere in there. Those are the ones that become a little more complex. But logarithms are assigned to each of these. And so those logarithms measure the values that you place in that order that you prioritize. That's the first set. The second set, you do the very same thing. And you're measuring, let's say if you want to do an assessment with an organization, and how you see your organization and how you see their values. And so you do the very same process with those as well. And it's quite an accurate readout that you get back. Once it's completed, you hit the enter button. It's completed. You check your answers if you want. And literally within seconds, I get the report that it goes through the computer and is calculated. Any thoughts or questions about that process and how it works?
Just to let everyone know, I am monitoring the question panel. One that may be related to this. It's a little bit off topic. Tom, I happen to know you have lots of expertise here. And the question is, what are best practices or effective methods for measuring learning? And they're saying other than the Kirkpatrick method.
Well, the Kirkpatrick is looking at the effectiveness of your own teaching skills of what that learner received, what they processed and can demonstrate in the learning process. Where the axiometrics from this perspective would be, what are the behavioral changes and what are the values changes in the individual you're coaching with or working with in professional development or succession preparation. That would be the key. Some people, in fact, we do benchmarks. We can go into an organization or with an individual. We can do a benchmark, take an assessment, and actually tailor those assessments to specific needs. And then get that assessment back, go through it individually and as a group or team, looking at everyone's strengths and vulnerabilities, and how they can help one another develop what others might be short in, and then how they could shore up some of the shortcomings of others. And then you can come back, 6 months or a year later and do another assessment and look at the difference in the progress that has been made. This is benchmarks are quite effective with the use of axiometrics. So does that answer your question?
That came in from somebody in the audience, so I'm hoping that answers. And what I'm going to do is invite them. If any of you have follow-up questions, please feel free to type it into that panel.
We're going to look at just briefly a portion of one assessment, and this is a personal pathways, which I give most of the time in my professional development. My most recent client was Chief Executive Officer of a hedge fund company, working with him in developing his leadership skills and his moral capacity. And this one is looking at identifying the value talent and the capacity to value is a talent ability by which you organize your thinking and emotions to make decisions and value judgments. Value talent can be learned and improved. And the first step is developing the talent is to identify the level of development and the types of talent that you have. And this is reflected in the assessment that is produced. It gives you an opportunity to evaluate those personal strengths and blocks. You can say personal strengths and vulnerabilities or weaknesses or impediments. People use different terms there. But one of the reassuring features of life is that each one of us have strengths that belong uniquely to us, as well as blocks that can interfere with our ability to use our strengths. Our challenge and opportunity in life is to translate our strengths into talent and to find ways to use our talent. So there are two parts of the Pathways report. The first is an analysis of strengths or sources of flow, which come from our ability to clearly see, focus on, and or balance our talent as decision makers, along with coaching comments to help utilize your particular talents. And secondly, an analysis of potential blocks that can interfere with our ability to make decisions, along with coaching comments to help you keep in check your potential blocks and interferences. So this personal pathways will look at intuitive insight, problem-solving ability, insight to others, practical excellence, common sense thinking, the analytical thinking, and self-direction. We're going to look, out of these 6 categories, I've chosen 2 for the sample because we'd be here all afternoon going through this. So the first one we're going to look at is the identifying value, talent, building value, sources of flow. Intuitive insight. And this, if you took it and you answered your questions, this would be what would show up on the report. You have intuitive insight, your awareness and capacity of yourself and your surroundings is good. Your ability to discern is good because you're able to look at people, situations, and outlook and determine what is wrong. You sense that whether you might can trust someone or not, or when a decision is right, or you're headed in that right direction. Intuition is certainly, we use that every day in our decision making, and that comes a lot from our emotional intelligence in making decisions. Okay. Another source of flow that we'd be looking at is suggestions for utilizing your potential. So use those intuitive hunches to think situations through, issues through that need attention. Decide on fruitful steps for your own development. Allow strong intuitive feelings to prevent you from overlooking important issues in life. Now this is, here would be, for instance, my intuitive feelings prevent me from taking some risk that I need to take. Therefore, I'm going to miss opportunities that are readily available to me. Or it might be revealed the fact that I'm avoiding something that I don't want to deal with and that I should deal with. Here's sources of interference in building values. And here we look at doubts and questions about the future, our attention to social, role, image, expectations, and are we optimistic about others? So let's look at first the doubts, questions about the future. This will be the printout that, gosh, I have doubts about the direction that is best for me. What direction do I need to go in? So I need to think about why I have those doubts. Holding back energy and commitment, because sometimes again, we go back to whether we're risk averse or we're risk takers. And this would allow for, when we're waiting for more energy or commitment, then maybe we're not looking at the situation with the broader capacity in order to make that decision. Seeing clearly and understanding goals and plans. This gives feedback about why we may have doubts about our objectives. And certainly, if you're in transition and not between jobs or projects or something like that, it can give and reflect some of the negative aspects of how it can have adverse effects here. I was working with my CEO, the most recent one, and it developed this, and he says, gosh, you know, my transition, because he was changing his company focus and developing a subsidiary, and he was having problems focusing on trying to run his current company and trying to develop this new subsidiary. And so he was struggling with this whole idea of how much attention should I pay to my current company while I'm trying to get this other one going. And he was absolutely amazed that this came out in the assessment itself. The next one is another source of interference with building and values is future direction of what it ought to be. Look at doubts and questions. Have about your future direction. Look for a source of question and uncertainty. What steps can you take to get started in the right direction? what are some of the positive consequences of these steps? And then certainly, who in your area can give some good advice, who has had experience? What are some of the resources, advice, and that you can draw upon to help to be more focused in determining that future? And here's the tendency to be too optimistic about others. Compassionate and feeling person that shows concern and respect for others, that's good. But we can also shift from being too open and available to trusting and sensitive to others to be cautious and sometimes skeptical of intentions. Now, if you are very open and compassionate, you leave yourself vulnerable for people to manipulate you and to use you. As a leader, you need to be aware of that. What would be the intentions of other people taking advantage? People read your emotions a lot of times. On the other end, if you become skeptical and cautious, then you're not caring about your people and what their needs are. Certainly, if we look at transformational leadership theory, that being people focused is quite important. So you have to try to find a balance from being over-attentive and under-attentive. Find that happy medium there that will give you the power to do the job, to be a leader of your people, yet at the same time have the discipline and focus and control of the mission and the objective that needs to be accomplished. Also, we can have false expectations, and because of our emotions sometimes, or therefore we set too high a standards that they may not can reach, or that we may not equip them to be able to reach. And, so this will come out in the assessment. And then here, you're not getting what you feel you should from your people, and you have disappointment. This is a cause for stepping back and reflecting on what your motivation is, and is compared to what your dreams and hopes are, and what are the realistic objectives for yourself or for your organization. Here's suggestions for building more realistic attitudes toward others. One of the times that you've been disappointed by others because you expected more from them than they could give, deciding personal issues by relying on your own intuitive feelings. Here is the whole issue of emotional intelligence. It's important to be intuitive, but if we allow our emotions to drive overwhelmingly our decisions, then they're not going to be great decisions. So we have to learn that balance between emotional intelligence and cognitive skills and decision making. They have to work together to make the best decisions about what we value. Otherwise, we have what we call emotional hijacking, and that is definitely going to be about 99.99% wrong decision. Avoiding confrontation. How do you deal with confrontation? I look at that. I think important thing that I try to get executives to look at and leaders is you've got to learn to confront the issues that are before you. And confrontation can be a good thing. I think one of the worst things to see are leaders who run from the problems or the issues. And so this helps take that individual and help examine, why do you want to run from this? Why don't you want to confront the issue in the appropriate way and deal with it? Come to a resolution. And it doesn't mean that you have to give a solution at that moment, But you know, when you're trying to solve problems with your colleagues and your associates in an organization, you want to be able, first and foremost, to listen to people, because most people just want to be heard, want to be understood in what they're dealing with. And many times that is the resolution. And that's a part of confrontation and dealing with confrontation as a tool, as a leader. Because honestly, when you're leading, it's not going to be all rosy. It's not going to be all success. As you well know, you've got to deal with those problems. I come from a military background, and I'm retired Navy and officer. And gosh, you learn very quickly. You have to learn to confront the issues that are there and to develop a good resolutions to them as best possible. So this is the personal pathways, a few segments out of the personal pathways that I wanted to share with you so that you can see if you took it and this was your results, that this is a part of what you would be seeing for sources of flow and sources for interference and ways in order to capitalize on those sources of flow and ways of developing and strengthening the sources of interference. Next, I put up a different one because we do use graphs in some of our assessments, and this is the manager assessment that we're going to look at briefly. And as you can see on the XY axis, you have the categories of A, B, C, D, and E, and then we have the various levels of measurement here, 5.5 up to 10, and they're color-coded. And we see the primary strengths in the range of which you saw on the measurement there, and then secondary strengths, secondary development, and primary development. Now, this is all on one page, and I was not able to get this on to one page with PowerPoint, but I think you can get the gist of it. So those categories of which these numbers correspond to are, you know, deciding what needs to be done. What does that manager need to do? How can he make that decision? Is that manager or potential manager good at assessing and managing the activities? Oops, here we go. One second here. Here we go. And planning and organizing, primary strength, making things happen. I just put on a professional development seminar. It's called Trust in Leadership. We had a CEO and president of Speakeasy who deals with corporate executives every day globally. He has offices in New York, Atlanta, and San Francisco, and they operate in the Middle East, Asia, and Europe. And we were at the Commerce Club of Atlanta. We were ready to have lunch, and the junior manager was in charge. And so he was the first time he had been alone, and the lunch was a little bit late. So making things happen, he and I talked briefly, and it was interesting to watch him take control, take the situation, and get things back on track and on time. It also points out how do we relate to others, which is a strength. There we go. So deciding what needs to be done. This is, we'll just take this out. I won't cover all of those, but a couple of these. What issues are relevant and what needs attention? You know, drawing you the intuitive and practical and conceptual analytical perspectives. And we all know that it takes time, experience, and failure to learn in developing this skill. But this gives us, intuitive insight. If it looks wrong and if it feels wrong, it probably is wrong. That's that gut instinct when making decisions about situations or with others that we're dealing with. Proactive thinking, thinking ahead, planning, anticipating what could go wrong. What are the vulnerabilities here? I like people, when I do my ethics consulting with people, I ask them, what are the unintended consequences? What are the ethical implications? Now, certainly we cannot, anticipate absolutely everything, but within practical reason, we try to anticipate those risks that are involved in what we're doing. But as long as we consider the questions in proactive thinking, overwhelmingly, we will be prepared. The other side of this, and when you do the proactive thinking, if such and such occurs, then how are we going to respond to the situation? And that way, you have already planned a backup plan if expectations are not met in the proactive thinking. Here we're continuing on with common sense thinking, using that practical thinking ability to see and understand what's happening. I've seen situations that, I can't believe my eyes. This does not seem real. But our intuition, common sense says, yes, this is what you're seeing. And that's quite important in being a manager, in having that broadened capacity to be taking in and filtering information constantly. But also in the assessments, we also talk about filters because we also have biases towards different things. And in fact, there are lines that I just did a bias test not long ago. It's interesting what the biases that we have. Just right off, many of us have biases against smokers, but these are preferences or dislikes that work in us subconsciously. Also, we have integrative ability. This is a critical element of the situation and to generate workable solutions. How do I bring the resources readily available to bring workable solutions to the situation? So that's the second assessment as the manager, and that's only a snippet of the actually 25 pages that's in the manager assessment. There's 12 pages that were in the personal pathway that comes out. Do we have any questions at this point in time about what I have spoken about so far?
Actually, I think you're doing great. I do have another question for you. I was going to hold on to it a little bit longer because I think it'll fit better later.
Okay, very well. Well, we have in Axiometrics International about 50 assessments and profiles. We have an executive management, a synopsis, an assessment. You've just seen the manager assessment. We have several different categories of management employability screens. We have leadership screen, leadership profile, customer service assessment and synopsis and screens, physician and service assessment and screens, nursing, security officer. We have, of course, sales, various categories there. We have 6 coaching styles. And entrepreneurial analysis, risk tolerance, some I've already mentioned, personal competencies, general employability screen. And we also have professional scouting for professional athletes that we give as well. We have a number of our consultants that work with professional teams such as the Atlanta Falcons, the Los Angeles Rams, and Braves, the Dodgers, and the Cardinals are some of the teams that they've worked with in the past. So that's the scope of what we offer. And the assessments are done online, and as I mentioned, you complete 2 sets of 18 value statements. And also, it's interesting, I need to note that these value statements cut across cultures and countries. It's borderless because it's common values that people hold when you look at the ethical norms of human beings as a society, of what we expect from one another. Our products are sold internationally. The Middle East, in Dubai, have done work down there, Mexico, Japan, China, India, several countries in Europe, and so it is widespread globally with it. Some of our clients like to subscribe. They will buy 10 or 15, especially of the employment screens at a time. The prices, though, I have to say, range from $40 all the way up to $300. $300 is the professional sports assessment. In development,
okay, and Tom, yes. I'd love to jump in now with these questions because I've got 2 of them, and I think they're fitting into what you're talking about right now. Mm-hmm. One of them specifically is asking us how Axiometrics can generate growth for my business, and then the other person is asking, can it be used with individuals instead of just the corporate setting? So yes. I think both of those answers dovetail well together.
Oh, absolutely. Well, it develops growth for your business by, one, you have multiple different assessments to fit the situation that you can use. And therefore, and the accuracy with which your client sees, I think it speaks for itself, and the validation speaks for the quality. I definitely think it's a good product to sell. And what it does, it reinforces your skills as a professional, and it helps that individual client to become more introspective in looking at who they are, what they value, and where they want to go from here. Because we do not know what we value until our values are challenged. And that is part of the moral struggle that we have in life. And, we grow up with sets of values that we learn from our parents, our teachers, and our community, and then we get into the world, and then all of a sudden, those values are challenged. And that doesn't fit the paradigm that we were taught when we were younger. And perhaps, for instance, the preaching that we heard in the pulpit doesn't fit with what I'm seeing here in society. And so how do I deal with that? And this helps that individual to look at those values. And so they will find value in what you're offering through the Axiometrics, along with your professional expertise in giving them guidance and helping them develop a plan of action to grow, and also the plan of action to overcome some of the impediments that they may experience, in recognizing vulnerabilities. I think some that I have worked with have thought, gosh, I didn't realize I was that vulnerable in that respect. I didn't realize that my people were manipulating me because I realized I wanted to be popular with my people. Well, you may be popular, but you're popular only because they see that you're way over attentive to their needs. So therefore they can manipulate you. So that adds value. to your services, and it is personal. You can have the professional development. In fact, the pathways is what I use most. That's the first assessment that I went through in this session. I used it with my when I was teaching at the university, graduate studies in leadership and ethics. I would use the Myers-Briggs first. I took that, and then I would bring the pathways in, and because these were professionals who were coming back to get their MBA. And what I did, and I gave it to them at the very beginning of the semester because they were getting a graduate certificate, so they had to take 5 classes. So they started the program with the assessment, and then we went through the whole year, and we came back and revisited that assessment at the end of their program. And it was interesting how they had changed. The values that they had held on to at the very beginning have now changed, and they found that they could be better leaders. Their moral capacity had expanded, and it also developed their interaction with one another in building team with their classmates and taking it into the workplace, what they had learned from it, and working with their own colleagues in that workplace. Any other questions?
At this point, I think you've covered what has come in. I had a similar question, and I heard the answer in what you said. So I think you're great. Everyone, if you do have additional questions, please feel free to type them in the question panel. Right. And Tom, we've got just a couple of minutes for you to your final pieces.
Absolutely. I'd like for you to go to www.axiometrics.net, and there I invite you to explore the website completely. You can look at some of the validation, you can look at products, and look at some sample reports under those products of assessments and screenings and development. And just feel free to examine that very well. There's testimonials in there as well. If you're interested in a sample assessment, I can send that to you free. If you're interested in taking one yourself and see what your values are and how you value in your capacity, I can arrange for that. You know, I'd invite you to certainly to send me an email at tcreely@ethicsfirma.com. And what I would probably do would do the personal pathways, and the cost of that is $40. And I would send you a password and a username, and you could take the assessment. And once I get it, I can electronically send it to you. Then you and I can sit down and go over it and discuss it. But that is open to you. If you have any question about any of the assessments or want to discuss them, please feel free to email me, and we can set up a time to get together and discuss them as well. So I hope you find this a valuable tool that you can use in your work as coaches and people who are developing executives and up-and-coming leaders. I think it's great in working with people who are already executives, but I see a tremendous need for young people who have not grown up with the values that I have, and probably most of the people on this call have. And I just recently read an article where Silicon Valley and the Markle Center for Ethics is now going in to teach the young engineers ethics because they haven't that decision-making ability in values as they put code into programming. And this has become a bit of a concern for people in Silicon Valley. It's an interesting article. So that is much farther reaching than just Silicon Valley. We're dealing with younger people coming into the workforce today. I want to thank you very much for your time, and I hope to hear from some of you or all of you. and I think our product of Axiometrics would be very beneficial. And thank you, Kathy, for hosting this webinar. And Kathy is an outstanding individual, and I appreciate our friendship and professionalism.
Thank you, Tom, and thank you to all of you who are typing in your thanks. We definitely appreciate that. A couple of you have asked, yes, I will send you a link to a recording of today's webinar on our YouTube channel, so do watch your email for that. And I will, of course, include Tom's contact information so that you can reach out to him directly and access that very kind offer of that free assessment and check it out. It sounds like there's all kinds of different ways this is usable and adds value to what you do as a coach, and even some new areas, just when you mentioned all the engineers with training on ethics and that kind of thing, this opens up a whole new door. So thank you very much. We definitely appreciate it. Thank you, all of you who are on the call and who have been asking questions. So we look forward to hearing from you and being in touch with you again. So thank you, everyone. And Tom, thank you so much for your time today.
You're welcome.